We're here at SlatorCon London, and I'm here with Adelina Lear. Welcome.
Thank you.
Adelina is the Manager of Language Services at ICON, one of the largest contract research organisations globally. Thank you for being here with us.
No problem.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously much of your role maybe involves managing parts of the clinical trial process and specifically the translation localization components. How central would you say that localization and translation is to the clinical trials process?
Sure, so good question really. So I think really with translations can be at any point in a clinical trial, and that's sort of what I was trying to talk about as well today here actually. So you might have literature searches, for example, that you might need translations for that. So for example, articles that might be needed, yep. But also pharmacovigilance materials. So you know, your kind of serious adverse event reports maybe. So that's again a different area where you might not think necessarily that you need translations when you first start thinking about it. And then also where I sit, which is in patient-centered sciences. So I'm obviously within language services of patient-centered sciences, and that's where we see a lot of translation need. Of course, clinical trials are going out and trying to enroll lots of patients from different countries, and of course those patients need to actually understand the documents and what's being put in front of them. So that's, I think it's really central and important. Yeah.
Brilliant. And the life science industry, translation, pharma, medical type translation obviously is a highly regulated industry.
Sure.
Generally. What impact does regulation have on the localization and translation process at ICON?
So a big one really, you know, in terms of regulation, and also I think really accuracy. So what we're focused on is making sure that the translations are good quality translations and accuracy in translations for medical clinical trials, and you know, this kind of industry that we're in really, it's very, very important. In terms of language service providers as well, there are certain ISOs that you can have. So for example, language services is ISO 17100 certified. Yep. So we have to live up to certain standards, if you will. And then also if we focus on linguistic validation, for example, yep. Depending on different endpoints, then you might need different types of methodology, including maybe cognitive debriefing. There could be regulations based on actually the developer, so developer requirements of certain PROs, for example. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it in terms of actually what methodology will be applied to that translation. Focus very much on who is going to be the target audience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned linguistic validation there, which seems to be quite a central part of the translation localization process. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about what's involved, who's involved, and how it works?
Yeah, sure. So linguistic validation really is kind of like a specific special type of translation which focuses on the translation of clinical outcome assessments. So questionnaires essentially that patients might fill in, for example. There are lots of different steps for linguistic validation, and there are also lots of requirements in terms of what steps you need to take. So you would start with a concept elaboration, which is really focusing on kind of analysing the concepts of the source document, and then you'd move into a dual forward translation, so two translations by two separate linguists, and then you make a best of both. After that step, you move into back translation. Could be one or maybe two back translations, yep. And then depending on obviously endpoints, then you might also have cognitive debriefing. There might be developer requirements to have a review. There might be clinician reviews. So there's lots and lots of steps before we then get to obviously proofreading, format checks, things like that, before we can actually send that document back out to the client.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you for the information. Nice to speak to you.
No problem. Thank you.